Okay, how's it going, everybody? Now, I hope you're all doing well. Okay, well, so in today's episode, I thought I'd try to say something about Marcus Aurelius and his book, The Meditations. A book that many people have taken great comfort in. A work that many find a kind of assurance against the harsh realities of life. But now, as true as that might be, and as helpful as this book has been for so many people, there is something worth noticing about it. Something that Michael Ignatieff talks about in his recent book called On Consolation. And it's this. It's that sometimes when we read some of these passages, we just can't help but to see behind it all a kind of profound doubt and fear on Aurelius's part. The sort of doubt and fear that you might argue that he himself couldn't seem to ultimately overcome. So let me see if I can explain. But first, let me start with the birth of the Meditations. So in his later years, from about 165 AD to 180 AD, while he was on his extended military campaigns, Marcus Aurelius would write these notes to himself late at night, especially when he couldn't sleep, which was pretty often, it seems. Now, these notes, well, they became what we know today as the Meditations. A book that today you can pretty much find in any bookstore, right? Okay, but why did Marcus do this? Why in his armed encampment did he retreat to his tent every single night writing these notes to himself? And what's he writing about? Well, for the most part, he did it not at all to try to compose a work of philosophy. No, but he did it to try to find some personal consolation. More specifically, personal consolation in the face of the recognition of death and the impermanence of all things. I mean, we have to remember that these notes that he would write down, they were never really intended for the public. In fact, Aurelius had simply labeled them things to himself. So these notes, they were just meant as a sort of therapeutic words written by oneself for oneself. That's to say, ultimately, Marcus is talking to and at himself, and actually to no one else at all. Okay, but let's back up a bit and give some context. Because the fact that someone like Marcus Aurelius would be spending his nights like this is pretty remarkable. It's remarkable because Marcus Aurelius at this point was pretty much the unchallenged master of the world. That's to say, for 15 years he had been, and still was, the emperor of Rome. Now, you'd think that someone with all that power and influence and wealth, that they'd feel like they had some control over their life, right? Some control over their destiny. But as it turns out, no, this just wasn't the case for Marcus. Or at least, this is what those papyrus notes tell us when we read them. What they reveal is someone struggling to gain some modicum of consolation in the face of death and contingency. For example, in one passage, he talks about the swiftness with which all things vanish away, their bodies in the world of space and their memories in the world of time. Now again, these sorts of sentiments are pretty remarkable given that they come from someone who had and will have statues erected of him, who could build the largest and most durable buildings if he wanted, and who could enlarge the terrain of what was already the world's largest empire. That someone with that sort of power to secure a measure of permanence could still break down and be overcome by life's swiftness and fragility is incredible. I mean, here he is, the Roman emperor, as protected and as insulated as one could possibly get, and yet to him, the human body is ultimately just a prey of worms. And there he is, the Roman emperor, someone who you would think will never be forgotten. And yet, according to him, after reputation, there is nothing but oblivion. No, this emperor just couldn't get himself to take any consolation in reputation or in posterity. The idea of glory, going back to, Achilles and the Greeks, to him, to Marcus, it was nothing but a useless hope. No, the ultimate truth was, in his own words, that mortal life is a little thing lived in a little corner of the earth, and then it's gone. It just doesn't matter how many busts you have of you made. Eventually, the final spark of any memory of you will completely vanish. Now, even though he was convinced that death was sure oblivion, Aurelius obviously did try to find assurance and consolation elsewhere. I mean, he clearly read the works of the Stoics before him, like Epictetus and Seneca, all of whom taught a kind of self-mastery and equanimity and virtue in the face of the vicissitudes of life. But I think that even here, Aurelius, despite his commitment to Stoicism, ultimately fails. He just can't seem to make things whole with himself in the face of death and destruction. At one point, he questions himself. This is what he writes. He writes, "O soul of mine, when will you ever be content with your present state? When will you be persuaded that all is and shall be well with you?" So at the end of the day, what could be argued, which is what Ignatieff suggests, is that there's something somewhat ironic about Marcus Aurelius's meditations. What's ironic is that this work has been and is used by millions of people as a way to find some consolation amidst life's anguishes and tragedies. And that must surely testify to its power and its efficacy. I mean, it's undeniable that there are some great, wise passages in there. But yet, at the same time, one gets the sense that its author couldn't ultimately come to console himself. That's to say, his own words, they weren't enough. They weren't enough to overcome the fear that he felt in the solitude in his tent on those long, dark, and cold nights. And it wasn't just fear. I don't think Marcus Aurelius could overcome his despair and his pessimism about life either. I mean, if any passage deserves to be quoted in full here, it's this one. This is what life is to him. Life, he says, is an empty pageant, a stage play, a flock of sheep, herds of cattle, a bone flung among a pack of curs, a crumb tossed into a pond of fish, ants loaded and laboring, mice scared and scampering. Life is puppets jerking on the strings. Now this coming from the unchallenged master of the whole world. Bye for now.